I light this chalice in memory of the light that David has given us in our lives.
Good morning. Welcome, family, friends, and colleagues. In the words of A. Powell Davies, words that David himself liked and chose for this occasion, today we commit to the preciousness of memory, a life that was mingled with our own, the strength and loveliness of which remains to bless us. Those whom we love do indeed leave us, and when we lose them, no spoken words can lessen our grief. But what they were can never leave us. The strength of their presence, the gentleness of their sympathy, the warmth of their love, these are ours always, interspersed with our thought and blended with our lives. What is it that moves the world forward, if it not be such lives as these? The great words that are spoken, truth, compassion, love, what would they mean to us if no one had lived them into life, into our lives? What would kindness mean if we had never felt it, and sympathy? What would we know of it if it was just a word? And love, the greatest word of all, the spirit of love. If we are to find it, we must first find it in ourselves and in one another. And we find it best in those whose lives remind us that God's other name is love. Beloveds, we are gathered to mourn and celebrate such a life, the life of David Moore Maynard, lover of languages and culture, devoted partner and parent and grandparent, respected Unitarian Universalist minister and mentor, steward of nature and the prospect of peace. Cross-country rambler, crossword puzzler, locksmith extraordinaire, counselor to those who shared his journey of recovery and healing, a friend imbued with curiosity, an expansive mind, and a generous spirit and sense of humor. A man who leaves behind something of his abiding presence, something beyond all time in those of us gathered here today. And while it is good to grieve, we gather also to lift up and express our gratitude for those deeper things about David that will never pass away and lose their vitality and will remain an inspiration forevermore. We stand with our present sorrow and our glad memories in the presence of an impenetrable mystery. And by our attendance here today, we pay tribute to him and we express our love and support for one another. And so we have come together. It is right and fitting that we have come together because we need one another in empathy and consolation, and because we need one another in courage and wisdom to face David's death and to celebrate his life. It is right and fitting that we have come together because a human life is sacred in its being born and in its dying. We'll deepen into our time together now by singing our first hymn. It's in the gray hymnal, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Please rise as you are able in body or spirit.
It's wonderful seeing all these people here honoring and loving David. As Reverend Robin had said about the previous reading, David gave us about this thick of readings and things of he wanted in his service. Always together here. And when he gave it to us, he said, I know you're not going to read everything because we would be here way too long if that was the case. But it was a variety of readings that we chose, felt were very, very heartwarming and touching, and it also represented a little bit of David. So I am doing a reading away from Robert Frost. Now I out walking the world desert, and my shoe and my stocking do me no hurt. I leave behind good friends in town. Let them get well winded and go lie down. Don't think I leave for the outer dark, like Adam and Eve put out of the park. Forget the myth. There is no one I am put out with or put out by. Unless I am wrong, but okay, the urge of a song, I'm bound away. And I may return if dissatisfied from what I have learned from having died. Before I say the eulogy, I want to share how I know David Maynard. David was my mentor when I was a seminarian, and I chose to ask him if he would be my mentor simply because he not only had parish ministry, but had also community ministry with his counseling. And I am a community minister. My career has always been, for the last 25 years, as a chaplain in various settings. David was my mentor. He was my colleague. He later came to East Rose, and we did a shared ministry together. He always felt me welcome. He became our friend, he and his wife Jane, and so many other ways. So when he asked me when he was diagnosed if I would participate in the service, I said, of course. How could I not? David was born in New Hampshire and grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. He was born today, December 8th, 1945. It is his birthday, and we are honoring him. He took pride and joy in being a son, brother, husband, father, minister, and counselor. As a conscientious objector, David felt compelled to suspend his studies at Harvard in 1966 to counsel draftees with the American Friends Society Service Committee. He and his wife Phyllis welcomed daughter Krista and returned to Boston to finish his degree and enlarged the family with son Michael. Divinity School ultimately brought David and his family to the West Coast, crossing the country in a Volkswagen van, the first of 3 he cherished. With his MDiv from Berkeley Star King Seminary in hand, he moved alone to finish his preparation for ministry by interning at First Unitarian Church in Portland. He was the first intern at this church. That's where he met, right out there, he met Jane, and they married, his partner for the next 47 years. His call to serve took David and Jane and stepdaughter Leslie to Peoria, Illinois, where they added a son, David, and gained an appreciation for Midwestern values. He was then called to the UU Church in Nashville, Tennessee from 1980 to 1993. Every summer, he and Jane loaded the kids in the van for cross-country camping trips, a memorable part of their childhood. After the youngest children left for college, David and Jane moved back to a magical home in Northeast Portland. And I don't know if you have been to their home, but it is very special. The family's roots on the East and West Coasts made not only travel, but hosting visitors from around the world a part of family life that came to define Jane and his life together. David began a second career as an addiction counselor and found great fulfillment in that role in his advocacy on behalf of the 12-step programs. He also continued his ministry, first at West Seattle Unitarian Congregation, and then from 2002 to 2012, at East Rose Fellowship, UU in Gresham. David had requested that we do this service at East Rose. However, we had a major plumbing and sewer problem there, so the church is kind of inhabitable. Plus, Sunday will be the first day after many, many weeks of it being open, and they're going to have porta toilets, and I don't think there would have been enough for all of us. So we came to First Church, where he had his beginning roots. In retirement, David and Jane frequently visited grandchildren in California and family and friends throughout the world. The Norwegian Star became a favorite getaway, and they cruised all over the globe. David never stopped counseling, talking every day to family, friends, and mentees around the country and the world. And he never stopped repairing locks, I can attest to that, exploring construction sites, and relishing the challenge of a daily New York Times crossword with anyone who's willing to help. David is survived by his wife Jane, 4 brothers, 4 children, 5 grandchildren, and a loving community he fostered wherever he went. Now, in the time in the service, that family will be sharing memories. And it will be David's children, his brother, and his wife Jane. And his daughter Krista will start.
Kind of an out-of-body experience here. Thank you all for coming. Do I have any tissues here? Thank you all for coming to celebrate the life of a very special person, David Maynard. I'm Krista, his oldest. Thank you. Today is a chance to reflect on what my dad meant to me, what he shared with me, and the things that live on in me. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I grew up, thanks to my dad, learning to travel confidently from a very early age. Our parents lived in different states, and my brother Michael and I were flying in the 70s, back when meals were included and came on real dishes. We were about 4 and 6 and treated like royalty by the flight attendants. We lived with my dad and Jane for months at a time. I gained a sister close to my age in Leslie and a baby brother, David, to dote on. I was always holding him. We took long road trips in the Vanagon, as mentioned, going west or sometimes east and visiting landmarks along the way. I learned to be comfortable in different places with different people. For better or for worse, this love of travel has continued. My dad liked to tease me about where in the world we were going next. My dad instilled in me the value of staying in touch with far-flung family and friends. As so many of you know, he talked on the phone daily, sometimes to a dozen people or more. Those check-ins were a lifeline, I know. We also talked frequently, and at the conclusion of each visit, I always remember him saying to me, "Is there anything else we need to talk about?" I had the unique privilege of being married 28 years ago by my own dad in a sweet little rural Catholic church. He was, I'm sure, the only Unitarian minister to share that altar with a Catholic priest. It was truly a special gift, as I know it was for many of you. My dad modeled a good marriage for us, showing love, respect of differences, good communication, and genuine partnership in his marriage of 47 years to Jane. Deep love of family also made him prioritize his grandchildren. Sorry. He flew from Portland to be first in the delivery room after our son was born. And during the pandemic, he and Jane traveled across the country to attend our daughter's college graduation. I came home with COVID. He thankfully did not. He tried to never miss a nutcracker with a grandchild in it and showed up for soccer games and school plays of my brother's children, Carson, Kaylee, and Casey, who are here today. The great love I have for swimming comes directly from my dad. He took me to my first swim lessons, and I swim laps every week. Every visit to Portland, we swam laps together, even till just a few months ago in July. In the last few years, if I felt weak or lazy, I would say to myself, if my dad with metastatic cancer can swim 40 laps, so can I. The way he moved through water was how he moved through life, embracing it, relishing it. We sent him to the hereafter with his swimsuit. Now he swims through me. I will leave you with a small phrase that my dad started saying recently, quoting a New York Times columnist in his last year's Christmas letter. Now I understand, I quote, that every day I'm given is as real as life will ever get. My dad knew and lived with the knowledge that life is a precious gift each day.
Hello, I'm David Edwards Maynard, son of David Moore Maynard. So not a junior, but, or D to many of you. I have a double, sorry. I have a double challenge today of both getting through this without crying and of being able to read my own handwriting, which was only, which is even slightly worse than my dad's, which was already pretty bad. So, okay. One of the last things my father said to me might sound a little strange. He said, I've tried to be an intellectual. It was the right thing to say, though, and I was the right person to hear it. And I'm sure many of you appreciated his skill at finding the words that we needed when we needed them. But the reason why that phrase, I've tried to be an intellectual, meant so much is because it helped me to understand the extent to which he shaped who I am and who I want to be. That might sound strange, he's my dad after all. Of course he's made me who I am, right? But many times over the years, I suspected that I was missing out on some of the things that he was to other people. He rarely tried to act as a counselor or advisor to me, nor did I often come to him for advice. We didn't share many father-son activities. Neither of us had much interest in sports. He didn't watch movies or television, so we couldn't talk about that. He had no interest in fashion. And our respective hobbies, swimming for him and chess for me, are both rather solitary and certainly incompatible. If you've ever tried to play chess in a swimming pool, it just doesn't work very well. But he did read me stories. He read a lot, right? Children's stories, novels, even an encyclopedia. Every night I'd read, we'd start like, okay, what letter are we on today? And he instilled in me a love of learning that I've come to see as specifically humanist, specifically Unitarian and Universalist, and even specifically American. My dad was the most knowledgeable person I've known. But for him, knowledge was always in the service of human needs, not in the abstract, but in the needs and the passions and the joys and the sorrows of the people here and now, the people around us, the people in this room. His knowledge was democratic and pragmatic, which is why he was as comfortable talking to workers on a road crew as to ministers at a convention. And he perceived the work of both to be equally valid and worthy of his understanding. My dad taught me to revere great thinkers, Channing, Emerson, Whitman, Dickinson, Frost, and poets, but also to look for wisdom everywhere and anywhere, and at the same time, to be willing to pause the quest for transcendent knowledge if you're needed here and now. And I think that's why he thought, why he said to me, why he thought he tried to be an intellectual. Because one who is so truly, deeply devoted to the people of the world around him, as my father, can never see himself as outside of it. For him, understanding could never be divorced from responsibility and from action. So an intellectual is what he tried to be, and the pursuit allowed him to become the amazing minister, counselor, sponsor, friend, brother, husband, and father that he was. So I'm going to continue to live my life trying to be what he was. So, and I just want to read brief, I came across this last night. Like him, I do my preparations for speaking at the last minute, and he would read the Sunday comics and then finish his sermon. So this is from Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, talking about the American scholar. And I think for Emerson, there was a particular American scholar that was important to know and to understand. He is one who raises himself from private considerations and breathes and lives on public and illustrious thoughts. He is the world's eye. He is the world's heart. He is to resist the vulgar prosperity that retrogrades ever to barbarism by preserving and communicating heroic sentiments, noble biographies, melodious verse, and conclusions of history. Whatsoever oracles the human heart in all emergencies and all solemn hours has uttered as its commentary on the world of actions, these he shall receive and impart. And whatsoever new verdict reason from her inviolable seat pronounces on the passing men and events of today, this he shall hear and promulgate. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Maynard. I'm David's youngest brother, and I'm here to represent my brothers Craig and John and Ted. David was our oldest brother. He was the first of 5 sons. He was, as you've heard, he was a mentor and advisor. He's also a happy birthday singer most years over the phone with Jane. As the youngest by a decade, my childhood memories of David are few, honestly, but my brothers shared some gems with me, which I'll share with you today. David loved to wrestle with his younger brothers, and I remember these raucous wrestling matches that we had in our living room. Ted remembers that he would worry that David would bite his tongue off because whenever David was concentrating, he would always stick his tongue out of the corner of his mouth. David was also the guy who wanted to know how things worked. When he was in about 9th grade, he got up every morning at 5:30 to watch a TV show on high school physics, which I tried to look up and I couldn't find out what the show was. I think it was in the Philadelphia region. In adulthood, David was a lifelong subscriber to Science magazine and claimed to read most of the articles, which is much to his credit. And in these ways, David showed all of us how to be endlessly curious about everything and everybody. As you've heard, David loved to swim in his youth, one of my earliest memories of him, and did so until just a few weeks or months before he passed. One of our late mother's favorite sayings that she would always share with me when she talked about David as a child was that he used to run up to her and my father in their bedroom and say, "Mom, Dad, can I?" And then he would pause and say, but no. Now, obviously manipulative, but also, as we all know David, precociously intelligent, as David just shared, and prescient. David was also somewhat of a perfectionist. He liked things done in a particular way, and he would encourage others to try things, new things, even when he had to hold his tongue, knowing, of course, that he could do it better. David valued every person for who they were and was always up for a good heart-to-heart talk. As a young adult facing the Vietnam War draft, David bravely led the way for his younger brothers, not me, but the other three brothers, as a conscientious objector, which all of them were. He worked with the American Friends Service Committee in the Deep South, counseling other young men who were also opposed to the Vietnam War. Things that I'll always remember of David as an adult include his deep belly laugh at a showing of the movie Kaja Pho that thankfully was subtitled. I remember the excellent sermons that he gave to our local UU congregation several times. He was so generous, and his singing, which was clear and loud. We'll always treasure the effort that David made with Jane to visit friends and family on cross-country travels, offering to fix doors and locks all along the way. And visits to Portland, where morning walks with David and Jane and a dog would include picking up trash in Alberta Park. David, now I got scooped on the Margaret Renkel quote, so I will substitute something else. We grew up in the First UU Church of Wilmington, Delaware, and our minister for many years and a formative influence on David getting into the ministry was the Reverend Bob Doss. And in the Gray hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition, Bob Doss has a reading, number 700, and so I'll read that to you in closing. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. For all who seek a right path, may a way be found, and the courage to take it step by step. Thanks for being a fine brother, David. We will miss you.
Oh, Jane, I have a reading first. Okay, this was a poem from Craig's childhood friend, From All the Good People by Joe Willing. All the good people that touch my life, the men, the women of my childhood, these tall redwoods high on the mountains, weakened with age, crash with the wind. An old friend, one by one, thin and faltering sap in their veins, like leaves, they wither and fall away. Remember how their eyes held yours, their words like fountains of cool water playing over stones.
Well, I'm glad I tried to get here a little before my time because I got to look at all you amazing people who came for David. I can't believe it. Well, in 1975, I walked into this church and I was going to help with an event, and there sat David, and we have had a wild ride ever since. And I said I wasn't going to stand up here in mourning, but in gratitude and celebration. But the mourning keeps sneaking in. So we had so much. We had friends and family and walks in the park and newspapers every morning, and vegetarianism and humanism and cruises and road trips. We had peace marches and shared causes and dogs and cats and chickens. We had homes and visitors. We had swimming and sex. We had churches and neighborhoods. We had letters to the editor and invitations we most always accepted because David's philosophy was in most things, and he was kind of embarrassed about going to Harvard, but here's what he put on the back of his. In most things, he said yes. we said yes together. And on the Harvard thing, I wanted to say the reason he was embarrassed, because he didn't want to be a Harvard man. It might scare away all the people he wanted to know, because he was, when it came to anybody he met, his criterion was always, how do you behave? How do you treat your wife and your kids and your dog and your friends and your car and your house and your neighborhood and your body and your mind and your disease and your own final passage?
Thank you all for sharing such heartwarming memories. Let us sing the hymn number 17. It will also be up on the screen. Every night and every morn. It is in the hymnal and also, like I said, on the screen.
In a moment, I'll be coming out into the congregation with a microphone for some brief sharings from the congregation. But first, I'd like to invite up Mike Duncan, who is from the recovery community that David was such a part of. Mike?
Oh, my goodness. My name is Mike Duncan, and I've been a student of David Maynard for the last 25 years. The first time I met him was at a 12-step meeting, and I knew within minutes that there was something really special about this guy. He had absolute humility. I've never seen that in another human being, and coupled with honesty. And I asked him to be my sponsor, and I called him every day for the next 25 years, every day. And I got to know him. When you do that, you get to know somebody. And I've never taken direction from another human being in my life. No judge, no parent, nobody. And my life reflected that. And David taught me how to live like a human being. Stop with this self-obsession And what a model he was for that. David Maynard had what I call, what Johnny Harris calls, a quiet heart. He was at peace with himself. I call him the shepherd from Wilmington. I've never seen anybody help so many people, and I've been around a lot of people who've helped a lot of people, but not like him. My temperament is exactly the opposite of him, and I wanted what he had. And I stuck around long enough to get some of it. In our fellowship, there are two co-founders. One was basically a marketing maniac, and the other one was a gentle, caring, empathetic human being, and his name was Dr. Bob. And that's who we got in David Maynard, was Dr. Bob. And I want to say something else. I want to thank Jane. For giving up about a third of her life while her husband ministered to people like me. Thank you.
This is an opportunity for us to also acknowledge ways in which David touched our lives the way they touched Mike's. So if you were counseled by David, please stand. If you were married by David, please stand. If David helped celebrate the life of someone you loved and lost, please stand. If David was your minister, please stand. If David was your colleague or friend, please stand. If David was a beloved member of your family, please stand. People are so much the sum of their parts. They aren't defined by one mistake or one triumph. They are everything and so many things to us. And because it was David's birthday today, we're also going to sing happy birthday to him in spirit. So, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear David. Happy birthday to you. Please sit down. I'm going to come out with the microphone. These are meant to be brief sharings of something personal you might like to say. There's also the opportunity, of course, to share your thoughts and memories with the family at the reception, which will happen after the service down the hall. Who would like to share something? Hello. If you just raise your hand, I'll bring you the microphone. Okay. Stand up and face the congregation. Tell us your name.
Hi,
It's a directional mic, so hold it.
right there. My name is Gavin. David counseled my wife and I. He married us 15 years ago. We're still married today, if you bet the under. I loved him immensely. I will just say there were a couple of times when I called him and he explained in explicit detail my life was over, there's no point in going on, and he was very consistent about responding with a good laugh. And so it helped keep me out of center. And there were a couple of times I would call. He always had a beautiful thing. He knew exactly what to say, and it was just amazing that wisdom he passed on to me. And I do miss, I'm going to miss the once or twice a year when I spoke to him when he was very, very snarky and kept me in check. And I just appreciate the humanness, and I love hearing the words from his family. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Mike, and I don't know when I met David, probably, 15 years ago
and I was without a sponsor, and I asked him if I could talk to him when I get messed up, and he says, yeah, you can call me anytime, even when you're not messed up. And it made it so easy for me. But just hearing his son talk about he was an intellectual and I'm not, and he didn't hesitate to help me. He gave me an assignment once. I was griping about my wife, and he said, read page so-and-so. And I read it, and he said, call me back in 15 minutes. And I said, yeah, that's her. And he said, no, that's you, Mike. So anyway.
That's good. You can't learn empathy from a book. I think David showed us that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wade, and my dad was Jane's older brother, so I'm his niece, and he married my husband and I 25 years ago, and we wouldn't be married today if it weren't for David. So, I mean, not just the 25 years ago, but in between. Anyway, but one thing he taught me, well, he did tell Amy that when somebody dies, take your favorite part of them and incorporate it into your life, and that's how, you know, they continue to live. And so I'm sure you'll all see a piece of trash at some point the next week and pick it up and think that you're carrying on David's legacy, and that's a lovely habit to pick up. One thing he taught me that I have just found very helpful over the last 10 years or so is to take your buts and turn them into ands. And so if I were to say, you know, Jane is, you know, a fantastic aunt, but sometimes punctuality isn't her strength, I could just turn that around and say, Jane is a fantastic aunt, and punctuality isn't always her strength, and it just changes the whole feel of things. So that would be just a fun little thing to try and incorporate into your life to keep David going.
Thank you for that. John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm the AV tech over at East Rose, and that's actually how I got to know David. His ministry was past my time, and there was a lot of myth around the man, and when I finally got to meet him, it was a tiny bit intimidating, because so many people just had, I mean, you've all heard it today, I won't repeat it, but when I met him, it was this just gentle man who was just the very model of humanity as it could be to me. And just a few quick memories. He did that very gentle keeping me in check a couple of times while I've been going through some weird illness of my own, and while he's, you know, got cancer and we're both complaining about it, and he says, well, I hope you have a very, very long life of trying to figure out what it is. And the second thing is, while he's leaning on the AV booth because he's having a really bad day and I'm having a really bad day, and we're both just nerding out over how the video transcoder works at our booth, and it was just this human moment, and the fire of curiosity in his eyes every single moment that I knew him, that he would come over and try to learn how this system worked while he was going through all this, and just, what a guy.
I'm Selena, and I had extremely negative experiences with the church as a child and was never, ever, ever going to do that again. And then through a bizarre set of circumstances, sort of found out about UUism, and I was like, maybe, and showed up, and David was amazing, and then I started going, and then found that people that I knew were friends with David and also went, and there was a lot of trauma going on in my life and my home, and he came over to my house and counseled my roommates who were having addiction issues, and was just phenomenal at a time when I really needed it.
Thank you for sharing that.
I did not expect to say anything today, but I'm Teresa, and I'm a neighbor of Jane and David's, and I moved into their neighborhood I guess a little over 5 years ago, and it was a fresh start for me and my kids. It was just me and my kids, and I had never lived on a street where people cared so much, and Jane and David would leave little things in our front yard, like the fairy had been there, a little fairy garden on my windshield. I grew up Jewish, and they left candles and a couple of dreidels, books at our doorsteps. My kids were 4 and 7, and they are 9 and 12 now, and I'm just sitting here today and realizing like how safe and cared for I felt as a single mom, just knowing that they were right behind us. And he let me into my house more times than I can count. And I didn't even know he was on hospice. So I think we communicated while he was on hospice 2 days before he passed about my being locked out of my house. So anyway, I feel really grateful to have been here today and heard other people's stories. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I'll come around your way. I think David had the keys to every church in Portland, or made them.
My name is Carolyn, and I attend East Rose. And for 10 years, David was our leader there, and I also got counseled by him, and some of the things that he said were, you cannot have a nervous breakdown. You have a son, and that's why you're not going to. And he said that he loved people so much and that he saw God through people. And he said, it's going to feel really, really awkward when you're growing. You're going to feel so uncomfortable. But that's when you know you are growing. And he was like a father figure, a friend, very inspirational. And I'm happy for you, Jane, that you had 47 years with him. Very happy for you.
I'm Marcia Stannard, and David was my mentor for about 9 years. When I was a seminarian, Cecilia Kingwin said, we've worked together for a year, but you need someone who really knows what they're doing, so you should go talk to David. And we had lunch about once a month, and the question that he most consistently asked was, where is God in this?
Thank you, Marcia. You know, I just moved to Portland in June, and I went to see David, and then I went back because he wanted me to have some of his books. And he was having mobility issues at that point, but insisted on coming with me to this outbuilding on their property so I would pick the best books. And I wouldn't leave without the best books. And I actually have 2 for you, Allison, that he said, make sure Allison gets these 2 books. So I'll give them to you. There are a whole bunch of hands up.
I'd like to make a brief comment about David's amazing insight. For example, I look around at all the people here that are here to celebrate his life. And somehow this insight, he wanted this service on his birthday at East Rose, but fortunately East Rose had a sewage problem that closed us, and it would not have been at all capable of holding all you people here to celebrate.
It's true. It's an amazing turnout, such a tribute.
My name's Toby Tommaso, and David performed Jan's mother's memorial service, and she had died so suddenly, and it was such a shock to us. And he took a time of our lives that was just overwhelming, and he made it. We got through it, and that, and then the second most interesting thing about David, I was a program leader 3 times, and I had the fortune, or maybe misfortune, of being the program leader on his last service at East Rose. And I'm nervous, and whenever I was program leader, it was kind of a dumpster fire. Because I worked full time, we had a young daughter, and I would sometimes put the program leading thing on the back burner. And so I was as nervous as a goat on this last one, and I knew this was his last service as minister at East Rose. And he at the very beginning, we're sitting together, and he goes, "Toby, I'm glad you're here." Just blew me away.
Pass this down to Jean, please.
I'm Jean, and I'm surprised that nobody has mentioned skiing, and I'm wondering if my husband John and I are the only ones who went skiing with David. We are members at East Rose. That's how we got to know him, or how we met him. But being able to drive up to the mountain together to ski was a way to get to know him a little better, and we treasure that.
Hi, my name is Jeff, and I met Dave in the 12-step program. I also saw David for counseling, and he changed my life. And I thought I knew something about God, but when I sat down with him, he helped me to see God in a much different way. Because the first question I asked him when I sat down in his office is, "How much do you charge?" I didn't even ask you that. And he said, "Doesn't matter, whatever you want to pay. Pick a number between 25 and 75, and whatever you pay me is what I'm supposed to get from God and what you're supposed to pay." And that kind of blew me away. And, I would show up late, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late." And he's like, "You showed up exactly when you're supposed to be here." And things like that, he just helped me to see God really differently. And I'm grateful for that. I would sit down, and he wouldn't say anything. He would just sit there and stare at me, and I'm like, "Is he going to teach me something?" And all I had to do was open my mouth, and then the lesson would start. So, but I also appreciate he would bring in fresh blueberries from the garden, and we would munch on blueberries while I would have sessions. And so I always saw his wife out there working the garden, and I thought that was really sweet. So, thank you.
Hello, I'm Keith Miller. I knew David very well, and I was a member of the recovery community and sought out counseling, and I saw David for at least 3 to 4 years. And what struck me was his devotion to family and God, recovery, and his ministry. And I remember calling him, and I asked him, "David, do you think that reporting abandoned cars is a little bit too aggressive?" He goes, "No, I do it all the time." So, and another fond memory was he asked me if I wanted a piece of pie before we got started, and it was delightful. He gave me a little book, As Bill Sees It. He was a very generous human being and beautiful to look at. I just enjoyed watching him sit in that chair with that smile and those fantastic eyes. And he's a sensational human being and a fabulous male mentor for me in terms of consistency, because as much as I love my father, the consistent portion was not there because of his disease. But David, in spite of his imperfections, delivered a brightness that I hold dear to this moment. I'm at a loss for more words, but he was always available. If he couldn't talk because of dinner or what have you, or he was traveling, by the way, I was always impressed by those road trips that he would take to be with family, tremendous family stories. He would always return my calls and made a point of it, and left sweet messages for me. And if he was a few minutes late, I would just wait for him at the counseling room, and I just would leave that room. He would give me a massive hug, and he'd always ask me, "Are you going kayaking? When are you going kayaking again? You ought to go kayaking more." And he'd ask me about my cat, and if I ever got bogged down with obsessive thoughts, he would just keep me, he would return me to the very moment where God exists, just right in that room at the moment. And I remember in closing asking him, I said, "Why do you do all this?" why are you in recovery? And he says, because I'm desperate. And so that level of honesty and clarity and transparency is why I fell for him. And I will tell you this, of all the billions of lives that have walked this planet, I feel incredibly fortunate that his meteor crossed over my head. And he was a force of nature like I have never known. Thank you.
My name's Tom Feller. David was my uncle. I sit at this moment with this intense gratitude and this astonishing joy that exists because, he's been part of our family for so long, and he's touched so much of us, right? And at this moment, we see all these people here, and I know going forward, we're going to carry that through. I mean, the fact that we knew him changed who we are. It's changed the whole world, and we'll move forward, and we'll move forward in my children and the grandchildren and everyone here. And this exact moment is a moment, and I think David was so appreciated, of joy and gratitude. And so just thank you, everyone. And I'm just so blessed to have David as my uncle.
Hi, my name's Sarah, and I wasn't planning on speaking, but the impact that David has had on so many lives just brings such gratitude and appreciation and joy to my life. I wouldn't be here today. My husband wouldn't be here today, and I know that there's so many people that aren't here that his life has affected, and just the legacy of that and the immense reach that his legacy has had makes me so grateful for even having crossed paths with him, even if I didn't know him as well as so many of you here. So thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Madeline, and I met David through my husband, Glenn, who'd known him for now over 20 years, through the recovery program. And I always say that at many intervals, David saved our marriage because he was my husband's sponsor, and the program always wants you to have kind of a local sponsor, and we only recently moved to Portland. Thanks, David. But 3 days before our wedding, my husband had gone to a new counselor and psychotherapist, and they told him, "You're not far enough into recovery to compel to this relationship." We'd been together for 3 years by that point, so cancel the wedding. And he came home and dutifully told me that we were going to have to delay the wedding and that he was moving out. And I went to my room and I was sobbing, and so he went back downstairs and called David. And David said, no matter what, whether this is a good therapist or not, they lack the main thing that is involved in all ministry and therapy, which is compassion. And to lack compassion and love for the person who most cares about you, there are truths in what they said, but without compassion, to take that action is cruelty. And at many times during our marriage, when things have kind of hit the wall, since he was Quaker before he converted to Judaism and I'm Jewish since birth, we would both say, what would David do?
Thank you for sharing
that. Yeah, my name is Glenn, and I've known David for, goodness, 25 some years. And he was the first one who told me I couldn't be an atheist because I hated God too much. And he was absolutely right. And so I also respond well to silliness. I've had many advisors, spiritual advisors. Some were more like drill sergeants, some were more kind of hands-offy. He had a way of nudging me of, I'm going to laugh at you until you can laugh at yourself. Do not confuse this with laughing with you. And that has always worked well for me. My being with my wife today is really, I blame it entirely on him. So his memory is a blessing, and I still have a lot of emails with things that he suggested I do that I still aspire to.
That sounds like he'll continue to nudge you in perpetuity, and lots of other people too.
I think compared to a lot of the people who have spoken, I did not actually know David all that well, but I did not know David all that well compared to many of the others who have spoken, but his impact on my life was profound, what little I did know of him. My wife used to work with him, so through him I found out that he had once suffered a disease, an illness that I myself came down with in 2016. And it had a very difficult recovery. And it was one that, for various reasons, I did never feel comfortable talking to most people. Really, nobody but my wife really knew what I was going through. But she brought me to David. And because he'd been through it as well, I was able to get counseling from him. I guess that's what I'd call it, basically just talking to him. And I really, to this day, treasure that year. I think it helped me get through the rest quite a bit.
Any other sharings? Please raise your hand.
My name is Trevor, and I had the pleasure of knowing David in 12-step recovery, and he counseled me. And I can say with I have a grateful heart. SA wouldn't be what it is today without David. He's brought upon some great guys in my life. Brian, Luke, Michael, Duncan, they're all, he's been such a blessing to Portland, and some of the fondest memories I have of David were he wouldn't say much to me, but he'd take his fist out and he would let go, and that was surrender. And I would always ask him deep questions about it, but he would always just say, "Take your hand out," and then let go. And he had an interesting tree in his backyard. It was a really pretty tree. It was like a pink, I don't know if it was a Japanese cherry blossom, but we would be talking and I would just stare at that tree, and the leaves would fall off of it, and it would just give me such peace, being in therapy with him, just to hear him talking and watch that tree let go of its leaves. And the funniest memory I have of David was he hypnotized a chicken. That was hilarious, and I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
My name is Tom Cohen. Excuse me. I married into the family. I married Amy back in 1990, and David married us. David married us back in 1990. I'm grateful to be part of the family. He's counseled me through the years. I'm very grateful for that. But what I take away from David really is the last few years that he lived his life. The cancer was obvious at a certain point, and I remember sometime over the last couple of years, I expressed to him my sorrow for what he was going through, and he immediately turned it around and said, "Tom, don't feel sorry for me. I'm so grateful for the life that I have." And he kept living and living right to the end without fear. I thought it was bravery or courage that he had, but Amy reminded me, he doesn't have fear. It takes fear to be brave or to have courage. David lived life right to the very end with grace and gratitude and acceptance for what he had, and I think that's what I'm going to take as I move forward.
Hi, I'm Amy Feller, and Aunt Jane and Uncle David have been so important in my life. I've known
well, Jane since I was born, and David for 50 years. He's married, of course, us, most of my cousins, most of my nieces and nephews, even my mother and her wife. He has been everywhere with us when we needed him. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do without him. I keep thinking of, well, I'm going to go pick fruit in the summer, and David won't be there. But I just can't help think how happy he would be to be here with us right now. And if we can somehow conjure that spirit in our collective consciousness, then he will be with us. And when, yeah, Jane, you know I'm coming back this summer because those raspberries and blueberries aren't going to stop. And I'm just, got any ashes in the garden or anything? My mother said about our evolving garden last time she was there, wow, this looks like a lot like David and Jane's garden. And I'm going to say that's my goal, to be a gardener like my Uncle David and my Aunt Jane. Thank you so much, David, for all you've given us. You buried my uncle, my father, my aunt, my grandmother. I just don't think anybody else can die for a while or get married. I will miss you so much, and thank you all for helping us celebrate my fabulous Uncle David. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mary, and for the past 12 years I've been working at East Rose as a musician. So when I first got there, David was my minister, my boss, and one time I led a birding walk for some of the members, and it was a miserable, cold November day, but he came anyway because he wanted to see a great egret. And so I knew of a place where they would be and took him there. And I would just say to you, whenever you're out in nature, whenever you see a great egret, could be that David's spirit is in that bird. So.
Thank you, Mary. I imagine that the family would love to have these memories. If you want to write them down and send them to Jane, you can send them directly to her or Care of East Rose or First Unitarian. Listen to your heart. It is telling you what to do. From the start of each day, hear it say, I want to be, I need to be the best in me. Believing in the good, the integrity, the honesty, the concern, the hope, the kindness, the flowering of the heart forever in bloom. O mysterious presence, Spirit of life that moves in and around us in our joy and our sorrow, make us brave for love. Life brings such blinding things. Help us keep our inner sight. Help us to see aright that out of darkness comes light. Let us pause now to gather our individual feelings and thoughts, meditate upon the meaning of this occasion, and say our private farewells to David. In silent reflection, we enter into a time of personal memory and reflection together. Let us be silent. We'll rise now to sing our final hymn, again chosen by David, so representative of how we have all remembered him and had him live in our world. Number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
This is a poem by May Sarton, Now Voyager. Now Voyager, lay here your dazzled head. Come back to earth from air, be nourished. Not that light on light, but with this bread. Here close to earth be cherished, mortal heart. Hold your way deep as roots push rocks apart. To bring the spurt of green up from the dark. Where music thundered, let the mind be still. Here where no wings rush, no sudden bird, but only heartbeat upon beat is heard. Here let the fiery burden be all spilled, the passionate voice at last be calmed and stilled, and the long yearning of the blood fulfilled. Now, voyager, come home to rest, here on the long-lost country of earth's breast. Lay down the fiery vision and be blessed. Be blessed. We take leave of David now, knowing that he is at peace. May the spirit of peace and love fill your hearts and guide all of our lives in the coming days. May we each renew our faith in the meaning and joy of listening and living. Let that faith give us the hope and the strength to continue our way. Holy Spirit of life in all creation, receive from us the life of David Moore Maynard. Let the best in him he renewed in the strength in us. Help us to dedicate our lives to that best. And let this moment of pain issue in peace of spirit. He would wish it so. So let it be. Amen.
Please rise for the postlude, and the family will depart first.